Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of Vet Chat, the #1 veterinary podcast in the UK. I'm joined by a very old friend of mine with the emphasis on the word old, Alan Robinson. We go back a long way, don't we, Alan? I remember it must have been 15, 16 years ago when I went to one of your invoice workshops when I had my practice in Liverpool. And got to know you, saw all the good stuff that you were doing, and then invited you, I think, to the first series of webinars that we ever did. And you're still talking to me despite the fact that I forgot to record the first webinar we ever did together. So it's good to see that we came through that rocky period and still good friends, at least in my eyes.
Still very much so, Anthony. Thanks for having me on this webinar. Now, just check, did you press record? So that's the only thing.
I've left it to much more capable people than myself these days. We've got Charlie, the AV guru, in control of all things technical, Alan.
Excellent. So that was possibly our first mistake, is relying on either of us to actually make sure that original webinar worked. But we've learned a lot since then. And as you say, we're still here and still doing good work. So, yeah, great to be here.
Alan, fantastic to see you. It's always good to chat. Sometimes, of course, we meet at meetings and we sort of say hello to each other, but we're both chatterboxers, probably me a bit more than you. So we don't really get the chance to have a proper conversation. I was just speaking to another good friend of mine on a podcast and learning all sorts of interesting historical things about them that I really didn't know. So maybe before we start into the podcast, fully, perhaps tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, it sounds like you have an accent which is not from these fair isles.
That's very true. It's not trying to mask it, but I feel I'm multilingual, so trying to cover that. I've just been back to Australia on a trip, and of course over there they think I'm a posh Australian because I've got a slightly British accent, and over here they think I'm probably an impoverished Australian. So I've sort of worked both of those. So, and you made the point earlier, very old friend, so there's a long history there. But yes, I'm from Brisbane in Australia. I went to Queensland University, did my veterinary degree after leaving school, worked in a very rural, very remote practice in Esperance in Western Australia for about 3 years. Very mixed practice. It was the sand plains of cattle raising, sheep, etc. But then they had a racetrack there and we had small animals. So I kind of buried most of my mistakes there, and then I eventually had the usual young Australian need to go travelling, donned my knapsack. I actually jumped on a live sheep export boat that was going to Singapore on my original escape. So we were vaccinating those sheep for anthrax before they actually went abroad, and I just happened to follow the last one on, and off we went. But I ended up in the UK. Did a lot of locum work. I was living the James Herriot dream, to be honest. This was the sort of early 80s, basically. So life was very different then. Veterinary practice was thoroughly enjoyable. I think possibly some of the best years of veterinary practice I had. I worked in places. My first job was actually in Ilkley, which is not far from James Herriot territory, of course. So I was just living the dream very much there. I worked for Goddard's, like I think every locum that's ever been here has worked at. Worked in a lot of different places across the board and just gained the experience. I eventually decided to set up my own practice in rural Wiltshire. It was a building being set up as a practice. Unfortunately, there was a family problem, and they had to sell that. So my wife and I took that on. Early days, we were painting ceilings and setting things up on midnight on New Year's Eve, and sort of opened the doors 2nd of January, and off we went. That was sort of the start of my veterinary career as a business owner. Always enjoyed the business side of things. It may be something a bit strange in me. I mean, as a reasonably good clinician, I was charming enough to the clients and I seemed to do okay. But all the mistakes I teach and train at the moment around finance, looking after people and things, all those were barriers and problems for me. I was learning stuff. And of course, even in that, more so in those days, there was no business management taught at university. Anything you picked up was completely osmotic. You picked it up as you went. And I was perhaps a slightly slow learner, but we got through stuff in time. But I always loved that interaction with clients, how the mechanics of veterinary practice, how it worked. And I developed that skill. In amongst all that, apart from having 3 children in amongst all that, I also did a management diploma at the local college, just because I was curious enough and interested enough to go and do that. That did 2 things. It gave me this management information, and more importantly, I was mixing with non-veterinary business people from Nationwide, Thames Water, Atomic Energy Commission, all these different companies. And it was just an eye-opener for me to see how that level of commerce worked. But equally, those people were caught up in a layer of management. They were middle managers with reporting structures and structures. Whereas I had total autonomy. I'd go back to my practice, say, I want to do a marketing plan, so I'd do a marketing plan. And it gave me that freedom to really use the material dramatically well. And so that was sort of an eye-opener for me. And I always felt other things being equal. I mean, the practice did okay. We went through the 80s. I don't know if you remember, but the interest rates went up to 17% at that point. We complain about the 5 or 6% today, but there was a time when life was even tougher. And just managing all those sort of things, well, just life experiences. And it kind of set me up. So can I do something different? And that's when really I sold the practice in 97, 98, and decided I wanted to go and do something different, a shift in my life to look at business consultancy. And I think that's around about the time we met, I think, because I was, again, very curious into other marketing ideas. We did stuff with other marketing and group coaching models that I kind of adapted and adopted.
I think we
were in that mode as well.
We probably met later, Alan, but I think I certainly became aware of you at that time because, of course, we had the Fort Dodge indices, which was a really useful tool. I had Fort Dodge vaccines. I actually set up my practice in 97 in Liverpool. I'd been doing dermatology. I added the practice element in. And fairly quickly, I sort of linked in with Fort Dodge. And, of course, that was fascinating seeing all that sort of data. And then, of course, I also came across John Sheridan, who is like probably the grandfather of veterinary practice management or one of the grandfathers in the UK. Sadly passed recently, and I know we both miss him. He was a great mentor. But that was really the beginning of it. But I suppose in 97, 98, you were very much at the forefront and one of the early adopters of this whole idea of let's work at how we can run practice more efficiently. And Fort Dodge was, probably the biggest example of the work that you were doing.
Yeah, all credit to Fort Dodge. They set up this program. I've had about 250 practices. They were collecting data off practice management systems. Of course, in those days, these systems were far more rudimentary than they are now. And the fact they got this data in the first place was a miracle. Yeah. Processed it and put together. I was asked by Matt Rowe at Fort Dodge at the time if I could take on the looking after it. They had a consultant at the time doing it, but he was retiring. And so that kind of gave me my leg up into guruship of data, the data guy, the Fort Dodge guy. Yeah. And again, loved the material, but it was just data. Until someone does something with data that's not knowledge or information or wisdom or anything else, it's just data. And so I took it on that we needed to organize this stuff and sort of see what the trends were and what it actually meant in practice. And that I developed a process around that and a bit of a following for that as well. I mean, the people in the Fort Dodge Index community were really people who liked business as well. So very much a like-minded set of people doing that. And I did that for 12 years with Fort Dodge, from about 2000 till about 2012. And of course, as we know, at that time, Pfizer took it on and moved it on from there. And things have changed in those days. But what it gave me was this deep understanding and love of that data side of things. And I know that's not the be all and end all, but it's certainly a good baseline upon which practice development, practice growth, even the people development side can come from. And I think that was the other interesting side. You and I have both done a lot of profiling around our thinking style and our decision-making style, communication styles. And you are very similar to me, that we have this sort of factual, refining energy, and then we have this sort of big picture, strategic energy. And I think the combination of that gives us that entrepreneurial edge, and then good people around us to actually deliver, which is the secret of all these things, of course. At that time, I was on my own. I was a busy one-man consultancy running around the country, north to south, east to west, nearly doing myself a damage in the process. In fact, in 2009, I had a health scare that said, Alan, just slow down, stop. This is just too much for the system. And it was fixed and repaired and carried on. But at that time, my brother, who you've met actually, came over from Australia just to see whether I was all right, which was very kind of him. And he and I actually started going to some of these internet marketing group coaching procedures. I was a member of one of those as well with you. And I thought, here's a model we could adopt. This could work in the veterinary profession. Many people thought not. And so that's where we started developing the vet group coaching model from. Really, the decision was from that point, let's build a business, let's build something bigger and better rather than just me being the one-man show. And that's where the sort of genesis of that came from.
Yeah, and obviously I was kind of there at that stage, seeing you starting to promote the Vet Dynamic days that you were doing out at practice. And of course, you've developed that into these groups, which, I've been to some of your conferences. There's very much a camaraderie, and a lot of the benefit, which I think we both agree, comes from just that peer development of relationships. And then people help each other, don't they? And the head, if you like, of the group becomes less important in that sense. And I know also you've carried on with the data, so some practices just sort of take data from you as well, and sort of you're obviously the expert at how to look at data and then make sense out of it.
Yeah, a couple of things in that. So the data side, we've now redeveloped our own Vet Dynamics Index, and go on our website and you can have a look at that. There's a free demo version there. But yeah, again, this is a great platform. I've developed a lot of the ideas I always wanted to do with the Fort Dodge Index into that. And that's a really powerful piece of work. We're adding to that at all times. But it's a good platform to run that. And you're right about the community side of things. What we now know, you can promote these courses and come to business things and speech, and others are doing excellent work in this field as well. It's now an accepted thing to do business management in the veterinary space. When I started, it was a rare and unusual thing to even consider. But the real value of it is exactly what you've just said, Anthony. It's community. Where is a place I can go with like-minded people that is safe and I can actually talk about these things? And that's what I think we've built very well. You mentioned the conference. We started doing those fairly early on. That was, to be honest, it was a time-saving process because we were seeing 4 or 5 different groups 4 or 5 times a year. So there was a lot of running around still to see these groups. So, well, let's just see them all in one place.
Yeah.
So we did the conference just through efficiency more than anything else. And what we got out is this real sense of community, real sense of, actually, this is like mine. Of course, we only deal with independent practices. We don't deal with corporates because they have their own structures and own support mechanisms built into that. But we are really here. And independents don't really have that. It's kind of in the name, they're independent. Therefore, they're on their own very much so. And we were sensing a degree of distraction, loneliness, not connected to the system, and people working very hard, very dedicated, doing good work, but just disconnected from the profession and from each other. And I think if we provide anything, it's that reconnection, it's that community. And we're really quite proud.
Yeah, I almost sold my practice, 2011 to look after sick parents. And so I never really got as involved, but obviously I've come to most of the conferences, and you get that real feeling of that friendliness and friends coming together, sitting on tables, for the meals, etc. There's a real camaraderie around the groups, and even I know you've had individual groups develop over time, but people mix together at the conference. So it's a really powerful thing, and I think you're right. That kind of feeling that you're on your own can then lead to bigger problems. So the fact that you can go and chat to people at Vet Dynamics or amongst their peers, I think has been a real massive help for for many vets, I'm sure. And then I noticed some of your alumni then go on to win all these awards at SPIVs and things. So the award ceremony, obviously something you've done at Vet Dynamics. And again, I think it's a real fillip for practices if they do get an award. Obviously, SPIVs are now doing them as well. And of course, we've at London Vet Show had the Vet Trust Awards, which is slightly different because that's not about practice, but it's about what practices and individual vets and nurses think about the various companies. And trust is really important. And I think we're blessed within the profession that we have a more close-knit, even relationship with vets and commercial people than the medics have. I know a number of people who've been in the medical industry come into the veterinary industry and just seen it as a more inclusive and a more a friendly environment in which to work and do business in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's massively so as well. Where the other thing I'm now involved with is working with building garden vets at Harper Keele Vet School, which is a commercial enterprise within an academic veterinary school environment. So it's almost a public-private relationship.
Yeah.
And it comes back to trust. That would never happen. And there's kind of three-way trust there. There's Harper Adams University, there's Keele University. Just two universities talking to each other needs a huge degree of trust. Then us coming in as a commercial enterprise in the middle of that is the other thing of that. So the trust is really important. And I think the drug, and it always has been, but post-COVID, the current world we're in, a lot of the uncertainty, trust is becoming more and more important. And what we often forget is that these suppliers, the people who work with us in this profession, often just get treated transactionally. Can I get a better deal? What's the discount? How does this work? Have you got supply or not? I think it's very nice that we have this opportunity through the Trust Awards, which has its own history as well, that we can actually give them recognition, give them some feedback to say, guys, you're doing a good job, you're helping out here. And I think that encourages them to step forward because they're run by budgets and they're run by corporate top-down decisions, etc., that don't always align with what we need to do. But I think it's a great open communication channel that you've created there. And my feedback from the people, certainly the people on the ground, face-to-face at the coalface, really appreciate the fact that they're getting some acknowledgement and feedback through the Trust Awards. And it's just a great thing to do.
I think we were talking about it before we came on, and I'm not sure either of us know who created it, but I think it was a dual effort. And probably people like Vicky and Catherine have probably done more than we have, because we just occasionally come up with slightly strange ideas. And then, as you said before, with the profiling, it's getting clever people to actually do the hard work and put it into place and make sure it happens, isn't it?
Mm. Well, I mean, there's this opportunity at the conferences. We have so many conferences now. So how do you spend your time in veterinary CPD is one of those questions. But, we've got BSAVA at the beginning of the year, we've got London Vet Show at the end of the year. We've got these nice bookends. And taking these awards, we were doing members, you've got members, we've got members, we're doing members appreciation event. We pizza and Prosecco. Come along, have a pizza, have a Prosecco, have a chat, and just meet up with some people. And that's all it was. It was not a sales pitch or anything else. That was just our nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you, I think, had the idea of the Trust Awards, or as you said, I think you borrowed it from somewhere else, of saying, let's do this acknowledgement thing. And the natural thing to do was, well, we've got this forum, we've got these people in the room, we've got them with a bit of Prosecco inside them. Let's do it there. And I think that worked out really well. In that process. And of course, what it also then, because people were up for awards, it did bring in the commercial element to it as well. So it became in a nice social environment. People could just shoot the breeze. It wasn't a commercial enterprise in any shape or form. I think that's the nice thing about it.
Yeah, I think we both have been good at borrowing, or as I like to call it, R&D, rip off and duplicate ideas, because we've probably got to at least mention Daniel Wagner, who we both worked with. We did a mastermind together with, which I know we both thoroughly enjoyed. Sometimes actually the best ideas are just in another industry. And, you know, you went into the business world to look for stuff. I went into the internet world, and that was what brought webinars in, because I just saw Vanessa talking about webinars, and I thought, why are we not doing this in our own profession? You know, I wasn't really that involved in education. I did dermatology. I went out, did a few lectures, but it was interesting. You know, it wasn't the traditional companies who'd been around for a long time, who liked the market the way it was, who said, oh, let's go and disrupt and do virtual online education. You sometimes need to have somebody who comes from the outside or comes from the inside, but sees the problems in a way that the producer doesn't always see the problems. You know, it's very much, what does the vet think? And obviously the reason Webinar Vet, I think, moved very quickly was I was a practicing vet. The pain I felt was being felt by other vets who didn't want to go to evening meetings after a long day, or nurses. So you need that sometimes, don't you, of one, bringing people in from the outside or going outside to look, because we can, as a profession, be quite conservative and a bit navel gazing. So it's to bring new ideas in. Sometimes you just need to look elsewhere because the future is already there, isn't it?
Yeah. No, this going outside the profession, I think, is really important. You know, as we can go down different. We know the profession is somewhat impoverished at the moment. It's got its problems for sure, and it needs some level of disruption, reinvention, and take through. And that will be and could be painful for the whole profession. But we're seeing some good stuff happening out there. We're seeing people picking up the banner. Some of the new business models, so Garden Vets, for one, is one of those disruptors, innovators. And what we've done is brought in expertise from very much outside the profession, who have come in and just looked at it and said, why are you doing it like that? Why would you do it that way? You could do it this way. But we've always done it that way. So, we're doing this. And I think the veterinary internal knowledge is one thing, but bringing in that outside and then forming this partnership. But if you look at some of the other business models out there, veterinary practice business models, you've got Creature Comforts, you've got Snooks, you've got, can't remember them all now, coming through, that are really looking at a different way of delivering veterinary care, a different way of looking after the people in veterinary care. And it's really, really encouraging that these things are happening on multiple sites, almost emerging together, but independently. So the thought and the work is there. And all of them, if you look at them, the important feature of it is exactly as you said, Anthony, a veterinary plus external partnership that bring in the expertise, but keep the veterinary prospect of it. Yeah, not to put too fine a point on it, I think some of the corporate entities, the large employer groups, are losing out because they haven't kept a veterinary balance in there. Some of them have and doing that quite well. Others have lost some of that, and it's kind of falling more to the commerciality rather than the veterinary. And you do see a difference in my observer of that loss of and we all of us vets like to say, well, we're different, and others could say, well, we're just businesses, but I think we're different businesses, very much so. I think we do have our own peculiarities that we that work well for us if we hang on to it, but could be toxic if we're not careful that we don't manage it. So it's interesting times in the veterinary world.
I think it's just, I suppose, before we forget, the Vet Trust Awards are going to be part of the virtual Congress this year. So, you didn't mention the world's biggest virtual Congress, which happens in February, Alan, but I'll let you off with that. I will give a shameless nudge for it for people who haven't already registered. And I think it's on the Wednesday afternoon we're going to be doing the Vet Trust Awards, along with my other super passion, which is the Veterinary Green Awards, which we've been running for the last 2 years. How do we facilitate the profession to regenerate into a more sustainable in all of its forms, a more hopeful, because I think hope is something that's missing, you know, and in a more environmentally friendly place, because we as vets should be leading on this. And there's some good things happening, but I think there's a lot more that we should be doing. But those awards will happen as part of those Veterinary Green Awards. I think it's Wednesday afternoon, which is it's about the 5th or the 6th of February. You can tell that this has been well prepared. Let me look in the calendar and give you the exact date so that I don't get told off by Catherine or by Vicky. So it is the 7th, Wednesday the 7th, I think it is, that the awards are happening. So those of you who haven't voted, by the time this comes out, it may have closed, but do feel free to come to that. To come live is free of charge.
Well, I would endorse both your virtual conference. I've been on that in the past, and I've been a speaker on that in the past, and that's always a good event. There's some hidden gems in there. I was really surprised, having been a speaker and then sort of going through some of the other material. Obviously, most of my interest is on the management side and the people side, and you've got a lovely mix of content in there. And I highly recommend. And of course, it's just there. You can just go and access it at any time afterwards, which is the beauty of it. Attending is great as well. The Green Awards is something new, and well done for putting that together. Slight danger is there. It's an award ceremony, and it celebrates those people who have done stuff, you know, well done you, etc. But what it really should be doing is encouraging people to say, well, what can I now do on the back of that? I've seen what other people have done. And it's not about getting the award. It's about getting a planet that stays around is kind of the trick with it. But I think the other part of this is, can we think about it broader than some of these slight stovepipes we're in? You know, regenerating the world, sustainability is a very important thing. You could say, well, I haven't got time for that. I've got too many other things, and then it falls to one side. But if you start to encompass it within things like business, like sustainability, like people first, like technology, suddenly you've got a broader base to work from. And when we work on a principle of regenerative economies, so which is actually looking at the broader view. So, you know, there's certainly financial capital. That's kind of what business knows to do. But there's natural capital. There's keeping the planet alive. There's human capital. There's the people we work with. There's social capital. That's the environment, you know, the social environment we work in. There's manufactured capital, the stuff we produce and make, and we should do that, you know, ecologically and economically as well. And I think that's part of the education process of all these award processes and things, that there is a bigger picture that vets have certainly an influence on, but also a responsibility within to take charge as business owners, but just as conscious human beings on this planet. We need to be standing up and say, hang on a minute, I might be able to save the planet, but I can save my bit of it.
I think it's a really great point, Alan, because there was the BVA survey which said 89% of people, you know, vets and nurses are, you know, concerned about sustainability, want to get involved. And then when you actually talk to people, they go, but how? You know, how do we start? And actually, it is the old adage, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. There are simple things you can do. You know, let's not have plastic, you know, Coke bottles in the practice. If you want to buy a drink, let's all agree that we're going to go more with aluminium cans, which are, you know, beautifully recyclable and very circular. And so as part of the Veterinary Green part of the Veterinary Green Awards, we do a 2-hour sustainability summit before. And that's very much showing people in more detail some of the things that you can do, you know, from speakers who are already doing work in the area. Sometimes bringing people from the outside, because it's good to see, you know, people like investors in the environment, what they're doing. And just encouraging. In the first year, we had 300 people at the awards. You know, the good thing about webinars is you never know how many people are in the room. And I was thinking it might be one man and his dog on a Wednesday afternoon in February. But we got 300, you know, connections, obviously some of them in practices where perhaps a vet and a nurse were watching together, because trying to do this on our own in a practice is difficult. We need management buy-in. We need, you know, people at all levels to really believe in it. And then this year we had 450 on. So it's obviously something that people want to know more about. We've got the Investor in the Environment Awards that people are taking now. And it was actually even interesting. The first year we did the awards, I was one of the judges. I don't judge it anymore because I want it to be independent. And I had myself and two other people, both of who were female. And we had two people we just couldn't separate. And I'm going, well, we must find a winner. And actually women who were often more collaborative. I don't want to be accused of being generalistic, but they said, well, why don't we just share this? Because actually, in the end, you know, if we're going to compete on sustainability, you know, as practices, as businesses, we are the worst of fools. We have to collaborate in this area because if we're learning things, we're almost duty bound to share that, even with competitors, in my view.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it has to be. It's sort of in the nature of what you're trying to do. What we're trying to do is preserve an ecosystem. So if we're not producing ecosystems, if we're producing hierarchies, we're defeated from day one.
Yeah,
there's not winners and losers in this. It's all in or all out is kind of the question. So yeah, applaud that approach. And award ceremonies always tend up a little bit competitive if you're not right. But I think if it's pitched well, it's here's some really good ideas. Here's some people who have really committed to this. And a few of our members are very much in that realm. They're doing some marvelous things from a sustainability point of view within their own practices. And they're sharing it with our broader membership all the time. And that makes a huge difference. And
well, I think at the dinner, at that dynamics with the main vet group, and they're doing some amazing work. Obviously, Village Vets in Formby, solar panels on the roofs, you know, Kate and Howard.
They're not wacky things. They're just straightforward activities.
But, you know, if everybody put a solar panel on the roof in the veterinary business, you know, that would be transformational. And that's where we've got to start moving people. It's obviously some things are more expensive than others, and perhaps it's not affordable for everyone. But if you have money in the bank, putting solar on your roof is a very sensible and, in fact, a very economically sensible thing because it makes you money in a way that if you put money in the bank at the moment, you're probably not getting 20% return on it.
Yes. Well, and it's that cost of living and everything else, energy, etc. We've got to move in that direction anyway.
And we're doing something good for the planet, which is pleasing everybody then, isn't it? Alan, just to finish, because I'm you know, I wanted to just talk about Harper Keele because obviously I was there for the opening of their new building. Really impressed with what they're doing. As you say, even just two universities coming together is a big trust thing. You then bring in a slightly crazy Australian into the mix, and then that makes it really interesting. I'm being facetious. You're not crazy, I know, but bringing you in, I was very impressed meeting Jason, who I think is a Kiwi, doing a lot on psychological safety as well. So there seems like there's some really good things going on. And I think what I also kind of perceived was trying to create GPs, because that is the majority of the profession. So you have to give them things that they're going to be seeing on a daily basis so that when we leave university, there's a number of things we can do immediately and be useful, because that also builds our confidence. If we've got a baseline knowledge that we can immediately apply, that helps to build, doesn't it? After, you know, when you do CPD afterwards, you can build and learning from experience, you know, in the practice as well.
Yeah, I think the Harper Keele Vet School have taken a very radically different view. I mean, every school that opens up will say they've taken a radically different view, and we've seen it since Nottingham and Surrey, etc., have been sort of part of that evolution of the education system. But one of the key things in veterinary education worldwide, not just in the UK, is exactly what you've just said there, that the students, or the veterinary teaching is a little bit of an edifice to specialisms. And so it's run by high-level academics. The students get exposed to interesting, but probably not very practical approaches. And so they graduate with not the basic skills. And I think there's a general trend out there. Some of these new graduates are brilliant, I must say. There's some superb things, and I've been involved with some of the fourth years here in their business studies and things. Some really good people, very passionate, but we're kind of educating them for a business model that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And we've got to change that. So our view is to bring in first opinion, primary care, emergency critical care skills and capabilities. So we want every student to have put in 25 catheters before they graduate, not the day after they graduate, they have to start fumbling around. That sort of thing. And I'm being a bit ingenuous around some of the education. Equally, Harper Keele have changed the entrance criteria. We wanted to broaden out the accessibility of veterinary education to a broader market. So they've lowered the 3A stars to something more like, B's and C's, and maybe not 3 sciences, but you can have some humanities and other sort of stuff. Maturity is an important thing. So if you've had a previous career, previous degree, or done others, veterinary nurses are a prime candidate for this course to get the higher degrees.
And I think I met somebody at the BDA dinner who I think was at Harper Keele, might be somewhere else, but was a veterinary nurse. And you're right, these are very practical people who will come into the job with a lot of practical skills and knowledge.
Yeah, it's an experiment. We won't know for 5 years whether it's actually worked or not. Yeah. This interesting thing came out. We know there's this gender bias in the profession that 80% are women coming through, and there seems to be, and the thought was, well, that's a selection process. It's just that girls do better at high school. They get the higher grades because they're asking for higher grades. That's who gets in. Even without the shift, and this is what Mike Cathcart will tell us here, head of curriculum and the Jews, even with the shift of entry criteria, it's still about 80% women coming through. Okay, it's just naturally that way. It seems to be that's the profession attracts that, which is fine.
Yeah.
So we've got to be careful of some of the assumptions we make of why we are the way we are. The other thing we needed was more diversity, obviously different ethnic groups coming in as well. That's going to be a slow burn as well, I think, because there's a kind of resistance built into the professional entry, but there's also a thought out there was, well, I can never be a vet, particularly if you come from inner city London or something. Oh, you're in particular ethnic groups. So that's a piece that has to be worked on as well. So it's interesting times. And then our business model is to remove what we call the suckiness of veterinary practice, all the things that actually burn out, anxiety, stress, damage, etc. And that's systemic. It's not, what we're trying to remove is a stigma on people. Well, you're a bit of a snowflake. You can't cope. When I was a lad, I had to do 3 bitch sprays a day, blah, 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 blah. It's not about that. It's the systemic business model does not work, and we need to change that radically. So a couple of things, people first, number one, that we really look after people. That's been hard because people come in with a mindset of, well, this is the way it is, this is what works, and this way I need to act in this. We need trying to change people's behavior. Technology, huge part of it as well, so we can adapt and adopt better technology to ease the cognitive load, to ease the emotional load. Yeah. You mentioned Jason. He's a clinical psychologist on our board, and he's developing well-being and performance processes. We've got a whole team of learning and development specialists working with us as well. So it's a pretty impressive thing. Key thing is the subscription model. So we've taken out the discussion of money in the consulting room. We've removed that to a different place because people are paying a basic subscription for all their veterinary care so they can get their veterinary care. 2 things with that. Takes the discussion of money out of the room, but 2, it creates a heavy primary first opinion caseload for our students to learn so much better and quicker. So yeah, so watch this space.
It's fantastic. I know it's been open to a couple of months. You've got the clients coming in, people are putting in catheters and doing all sorts of exciting stuff. So I just wish you good luck with that, Alan, and obviously the continued success, both the garden vets, but also the vet school, which on my viewing of it, it looks a really promising project.
Yeah. Well, what will make the difference here, Anthony, is you and me and the rest of the profession collaborating and working together exactly as we are and sharing this information. So well done, you and Webinar Vet, for all the good work you do in the profession.
Well, and seeing as this is becoming a mutual appreciation society, and thanks for everything you're doing at Vet Dynamics as well. We're massaging our egos, but the main thing is that the profession is, as I'm not going to say elders, but a bit older. We do have a responsibility, as you said before. We used to do 5 bitch bays a day and all that sort of stuff. I think it's important that we're there to support the profession and, make sure that people stay in love with it, because it is one of the best jobs in the world. And yet somehow we've managed to turn people off, and we need to, I know you're doing a lot of work on that, and please continue and, come back and do a podcast with us when you know what the answer is.
Okay, I'll hang around for long enough for that. Thanks for having me on,
Alan. Thanks
really
so much. Yeah, appreciate this. Thanks for your time. Take care. Thanks everyone for listening. Some really important issues, I think, that Alan's looking at and discussing. So thank you so much again, Alan. And thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully see you on a podcast, a webinar, or who knows, even face-to-face sometime soon. Take care. Bye-bye.